Welcome, everyone. Yeah, we've got a very, very powerful topic for this one today. We've actually been planning this one for quite a while, but due to technical difficulties and this and that, it's only just now happening. But here we are. So thanks for joining us, Brian. Good to see you, brother.
Always, always.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and set us up because you've got the visual there and everything to kind of set up the premise of this concept.
Absolutely. I would love to. Um, so essentially, this was something that I was explaining the concept of what is known as a ghost door in both the Taoist tradition and the Norse tradition. We have it reflected in the mythos as well to you. And then one day, as we were talking this out in a private conversation, we really unlocked this kind of feedback loop. So to explain this, I'm going to give a short introduction into the nine worlds in the Nordic understanding and what each of those kind of correlate and represent on a personal internal level. So we're going to start in the realm of the Norse. So that would be the realm obviously on the top, and then we'll move clockwise. So then we'll be moving to the northeast and the east, so on and so forth. So the realm in the north is known as Muspelheim, or not Muspelheim, sorry, Niflheim, and it is the mist world. This is the realm that represents potential unmanifested energy. So things that are out there in the void, but they haven't quite come into manifestation. They're just the potential for them is there. Then moving to the realm of the northeast, that is going to be the realm of Asgard, and this is the realm of celestial deities, but it represents on an internal aspect is our belief systems, our convictions, our morality, things like that. Then moving to the realm of the east, we have Jotunheim, which is the giant home, and it represents our ego and how we interact and view ourselves. Moving to the southeast is going to be Svartalfheim, which is the dwarf home, and this correlates with our subconscious mind. And then moving to the south, that is Muspelheim, which is the fire home, and this is deals with our actions that we take. Moving to the southwest, that is going to be Helheim, and this is the realm of the unconscious, and this is the one of the main realms we're going to be really focusing on in this because it's the gate through which this all opens, and that deals with the unconscious mind. And then in the west is Vanaheim, which is the home of the Vani or the terrestrial deities, but that is the realm of how we deal and relate to others. And then in the northwest is the Elfheim, or the elf home, which is the realm of the ascended masters, the ancestors, the guides. Any of those phrases, could work for them. And then obviously in the center is Midgard, which is the earth. It's where everything, all these energies of the different worlds come together. And it's not only this physical reality field, but you are also Midgard. So, and what we were talking about now that we have this foundational understanding is in the Taoist tradition, when they're dealing with the Bagua, there's something known as the ghost door between the realm of the southwest and the northeast. And this is also reflected in the Norse mythos. The realm of Asgard is surrounded by a wall, but it has a crack in it. And this represents that whenever in Helheim, in our unconscious mind, if we have some shadows or some pain, some things in there that we haven't dealt with, those will manifest as demons, as a way to look at it to gain an understanding through a mythological perspective. Those will manifest as demons that can then break through the cracks of Asgard and infect what would be, our higher belief systems. So what happens with this this whole cycle here is as we're going, the energy is manifested in a clockwise motion. So this is, as you follow this cycle along, it's kind of a constant cycle of behavior that we're always in. But what happens is in this cycle, if we have some of these demons in the unconscious realm, some of these unresolved issues, they can then sneak up and bypass the rest of the cycle. So then they sneak up and they manifest in our actions, which then get into our, our actions in Midgard, which are then getting into our higher belief systems. So when people haven't done their healing, their deep healing, and they latch onto belief systems, they can become very dogmatic in those. So then that dogmatism feeds into the ego. And then because it's building up into the ego, it gets pushed into the realm of the subconscious mind. Once in the realm of the subconscious, we then take action on it. And because we're taking action on it, those actions, those belief systems then get pushed further down into the realm of the unconscious mind, where they can then continue to fester and become more demons. And what happens with this is, with this cycle, that unconscious behavior, the unconscious projection, it just creates this feedback loop here. Because what it does is it cuts you off from being able to truly connect and relate with others, being able to connect and relate to your guides, and cutting you off from the unmanifested, the potential energy. So that's why people get stuck in these loops and they're like, I just can't change it. I don't know why I'm stuck. And they don't have anything new coming into their life. It's because they've cut themselves off from people. They've cut themselves off from their guides and from potential energy, all because they're unaware of their unconscious projection and pain, and they haven't done that work. So I think that's a good little kind of like foundational understanding into it here. And then, I'll pass it on to you here to start doing a little riff on it.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, it's so profound. Like, I feel like we could spend so much time on this unpacking it, because it's amazing. But yeah, I mean, it hits right to the very center of the causal factors of these repeating cycles that people find themselves in. And when you think about the very crucial dynamic, you and I especially, we've been talking a lot more about the importance of reclaiming your sovereignty. And one way to measure that is being at the cause and not at the effect. When you're at the cause, you are being conscious of your intentions and your actions. Whereas if you're acting out of your unconscious behaviors, you're not even aware of them, but your actions, because as we know of the law of cause and effect through natural law, those behaviors still are creating. And so you're just getting caught in the whirlwind of your own shit, and you don't know why, because it's your unconscious behaviors. Where
exactly.
That's why it's so important to shift from being at the effect of just being at the whims of the elements and just getting blown around constantly by all this unconscious chaos that you're creating, and being mindful of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions, analyzing where they're coming from at the roots of them, and then weeding out, literally, like, you're the gardener of your own consciousness, and you got to pull those weeds, things that don't serve and things that are like a weed infiltrating your landscape and siphoning energy and sucking the sucking out the nutrients. Yeah, that's my little
nice. Yeah, no, that's a very, very great point there. And I think there's so many ways, as we've talked about this quite a few times now. There's so many ways this cycle applies. So I guess we can talk about a few of them. And the first one I'd like to hit on is something that we see. Say again, I'm sorry.
I said that just as a reminder, a relationship is your relationship. And so if you are at the cause of your behaviors, then this is going to determine how you are relating to all the things in your life and all the many, so all the many things that this can, the way you relate to other people, your romantic interests, your friends, the way you relate to your career and your boss, or yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no, that's absolutely perfect point. That was a great thing to put in there. But yeah, I guess the first example that we could look at is that, in the alternative, the community, the truth community, whatever label you'd like to throw on it, we can see sometimes when people first start to go through like the awakening process, they may come onto some information and then they kind of latch onto it, and then they get stuck in that state of holding the keys without opening the door, as we've spoken about before. And what it is they get this knowledge, and it feels so profound to them that it kind of distracts them from their own inner stuff, and they don't take the time to go do that healing and really delve into the unconscious. And I think a lot of what we see in the movement, a lot of people, they only think it's about just as much research as you can do and as much, information, intellectual based stuff as you can get. But the healing isn't just played within the head. It's something that actually has to be done and processed.
I got something.
Yeah, go for it, man.
So the ego brain is what separates you from source, from the all, from the everything. So and that's the intellect. I mean, that's the form. The left brain is ruled by the ego. So the masculine brain, that's all. I mean, again, intellect literally means to pick apart or to break down. So that is the separation. So when you're, grasping for information and you're only holding it intellectually in your left brain and you're not integrating it, then you're still separated from it. You're not becoming that truth. You're not living the truth. You're just holding it in your mind and then spitting it out intellectually in your little online debates and whatever, in your little, I beat you, or, I flung poo better than you did. Like, that you see happening.
Right.
That's what it is.
Totally. And I think yeah. And one thing I think we can notice with this cycle, no matter what social dynamic we're applying it to, whether it be in the alternative community, in romantic relationships, with addiction, whatever it is, whenever people get stuck in this cycle, you'll notice this symptom, and it's always the pointing of the finger outward, and it's never inward. It's always blaming our problems on our life situations or things that happen to us, or this victimhood mentality. That, you see the victimhood mentality come through real strong with this, because there's all that unconscious, healing that, and hurt down there that they need to heal.
What's tricky about it too is because they have identified with this, I'm an anarchist now, I'm not part of the problem anymore. That's what it comes down to. That's the lie that they're telling themselves to make them think that they're somehow exempt, as if that's the only truth that matters, and that once they stop voting or stop whatever paying their taxes, that suddenly they're not part of the problem anymore.
Right.
I mean, honestly, your own projection and just the very basic way that you relate to others is just as much anarchy as I don't participate in state stuff anymore. I mean, anarchy is a way of life. Anarchy is an extension of sovereignty, and you can't be sovereign when you're not owning yourself. And what that really means is owning all of your subconscious behaviors. So you can't really, not to be like that guy that's like, it's not real anarchy, but I am being that guy. It's not real anarchy if you're not completely owning your behavior, because you're not sovereign.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think this is something that we can hit on here too, is that when people they can kind of, when they first start to get in like the awakening stage, and like say they're waking up more to like the political kind of side of things, getting some of these realizations is such a major stimulation for the brain that adrenaline is actually like released. But then you can get people that they kind of become the conspiracy junkies, and then that's where you see like some of the conspiracies, they just go, not to say that there aren't conspiracies out there, that things don't happen that aren't, you know, obviously organized and planned, but some of the things that have just gotten so extreme and so far out there that people are so fucking disconnected from reality, and they just hold on to that thing so hard that they become very dogmatic in how they present it, and anyone that doesn't understand that is stupid and is you know, trying to, you know, control us, or is an Illuminati puppet, or, you know, any of that crap. Like that is all unconscious projectile vomiting, as we like to call it, you know, where there's not that healing there. So then they just get stuck, and then they take this idea that they found, and then they latch onto it, and then they become attached in a dogmatic way to try to find that next adrenaline fix, you know, because it's right. Their identity becomes that, like, oh, I'm a truther, I'm seeking after this next big thing, but they're looking for all these realizations outside, instead of like, what's the next big thing within you? Like, let's delve within, like, let's take it there, because that's where it needs to go. And that's why the community kind of gets laughed at by the dark occult, is because as long as we're out there fucking bickering amongst people and we're looking outside of ourselves, we're not coming into the real knowledge that matters. You can go learn about all the different things the CIA has done, or all this different shit. It's not that knowledge isn't valuable, but it doesn't actually do a damn bit of good to heal your pain.
Right.
You know, that's what we need to look at.
And if the whole system is running on coercion, then you have to deal with the traumas that are inherently caused by that coercion. So just pointing out it's all coercion, that's not healing. It's the start, but essentially, like all, you know, states of being traumatized, it's a drug. The truth, the conspiracies, it's all a drug. You know, they get that high off of uncovering the next big thing. And what does any good drug do is distract you from yourself, just as much as your Netflix and your cheesecake and your heroin.
That's good, dude. That's good. Yeah, no, it's because that's what it is. It's a distraction from the self, man.
Well,
like, you know,
the real inside job wasn't 9/11. The real inside
yeah.
That's the ultimate conspiracy.
Yeah. No, it really is, because that's the knowledge that really empowers us. Because when we can start really stepping in and being able to like truly analyze ourselves and take our power back and get out of the fucking victimhood mindset, we start going a long ways. Like, yeah, there is a system that's there, but it's all a system that's in the mind. It doesn't actually exist. It's just mental conditions and beliefs that people are operating on, because they're unconscious of all their shit, because of this feedback. So becoming aware of this information and being able to take action with wisdom on it, that's what we need to do to really start making the change, you know, to start organizing, and not just, and, you know, I think trying to look to make connections to actually grow, rather than just be the person that, oh, I know more than you and you're wrong, or you're so stupid, or you're a stupid sheep, or any of that
doing
fucking
for
crap.
Freedom, really.
Yeah.
It's doing a whole lot of this for your ego, but it's not making you or anybody else any more free. And all this, I mean, there's so much high school cliquey bullshit in the freedom community. It's sorry, but it's really disheartening and difficult to look at. I mean, that may seem, I don't know, judgy or pretentious, but I mean, it's a practical judgment. Like, if we really care about freedom as much as we say we did, then wouldn't it make sense that the slaves or the inmates all get together and come up with a plan on how to get the fuck out of here, and then we can fight all we want out, you know, whatever. But let me just drop this little truth bomb. Until we become as unified and well organized as the dark elite, we're fucked. It's that simple. And more so, really, because that's just meeting them at their level. Of course, we have the advantage of vast numbers going for us. But I mean, at this rate,
yeah, no, and like I said, there is a lot of I guess what you call ego stroking, and it's something that we, and this is something we can look at, observe, because I'm sure all of us have had interactions and trying to teach people and share information where we just kind of get in this back and forth bickering, and it's not like making any progress, or where we've went at something from a little bit of a dogmatic perspective and weren't necessarily being a midwife of consciousness, as we've talked about, and really trying to meet that person at where they're at and then give them directions to where they need to get to. And when we act like that, we interact with people like that, we can see that those interactions don't bear any good fruit. In fact, they generally turn people away. So rather than actually you're actually doing any good, you're actually doing more harm, because people are hearing about these concepts from you. But if you come off as a complete asshole that hates yourself and hates the world, and you're just calling everybody, names and insults, or telling how stupid, no one wants to be that guy. So why would they listen to you if you're coming off like that?
And this is not just us pontificating. I can say with confidence, I have seen a massive insurgence of comments that I've observed of non-inner circle people, not, people that are a little bit more mainstream or, normie, whatever term you want to use. I'm seeing a lot of comments, people saying things like, oh, the natural law people, and like saying negative things, as in, not about, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. No, they're just saying, wow, what a bunch of dogmatic assholes. And I've seen a lot of people say this. I mean, what does that tell you? Are we really being good ambassadors for the great work? Are we really, are we turning people off to freedom? I mean, we've got to be honest about this shit. This is the real world. This is what we're dealing with. When you start actually studying the hidden laws of the universe and realizing the masculine and feminine principles, it's so obvious what a lack of the feminine care is not present in our relating to each other. It's totally brain, logical, no connection, no empathy, no care. I mean, there's some care. I see that in the general like motivation with a lot of anarchists. It's not that they don't care at all. They have good intentions in that they want everyone to be free. I can generally say that about anarchists, and that's good, but their interactions don't reflect that. When you see them talking to people, you don't see that I'm trying to approach you, I'm trying to help you, I'm trying to help us all be free. It's just about, I'm trying to, skull fuck you with my truth, basically.
Right. And I think a lot of that comes from this feeling of being, helpless. So it because you wake up and then you see that you feel like you're a slave, or you're being controlled, and you see the system around, and you get angry, and you feel like you're angry at everyone else for the situation you're in. But, you don't stop to think that, you were part of that situation, then realize that you have to go back, and it has to change on the level of the individual. And when people get stuck in a fear-based mindset, and that, that's when it sets up for that unconscious feedback loop. Because fear, it just drops you into that lower state of awareness. And then obviously, because you're dropping out of your conscious awareness, the subconscious and unconscious behavior take over a lot more.
Yes.
And then that's when, if you haven't done that healing, these things are going to come out. And it's a projection of their own inner anger from having been asleep for so long, or having been a part of the system, and they're just so angry, so they're trying to express that. And there is a place for righteous anger and to use it, but to only be that, or to try to identify that as a total mask, it's becoming dogmatic. If it's becoming part of your ego, is that's how you see yourself, that's the only way you can present information, there's something you need to stop and look at. Because there is a time to be serious, to bring down that hammer, that Jupiter retrograde that we've talked about. But there's also a time to fucking step back and be able to open up and empathize and show another human being that you genuinely fucking care and that you can fucking connect to them. Like, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's why it's a feedback loop. It's like Groundhog Day, like we were joking about the other day.
Yeah, exactly.
Repeating. And, you know, like I can honestly say I'm speaking from, you know, experience in this exact thing. You know, too. Mm-hmm. It's a natural part of the awakening process. The first, you know, well, what's it called? The 5 stages
of blackening. Well, the blackening's the first stage.
Yeah, but in the psychology concept, 5 stages of grief or something like that. And
okay, sorry, like I was on the wrong thing.
One. So you're not getting it past stage 1. Like you gotta move. I mean, you know, that process it's describing is the process of healing. If you're stuck in stage 1 and you're just angry until you're a bitter old man, just like, you know, we'll never see anarchy in our day, you know, just totally negative, like stuck in just projecting your own helplessness on the world. You know, keep going. Like I was angry. It's natural. It's right to be angry, but it's not a useful place to stay. It's toxic to you and everybody else. So for your own sake and for ours, keep going, you know, take action. Anger is useful as a call to action. If you just stay angry, it's not doing you any good. That's the whole point. When you see something that's wrong with the world, it's supposed to make you angry so that you actually do something about it. But, you know, like if you saw somebody getting mugged, you know, in the street and it makes you mad because it's an injustice, and all you do is just stand there and just like, you know, grab people as they walk by and look at this scum sitting there robbing people, like, and not actually doing anything, you know. Why are you even mad if you're not going to do anything? What right do you even have to be mad, honestly?
Yeah, exactly. One, and look at it, you know, from the perspective of, say you are wanting, if you do want this freedom, if you want people to understand the information, if someone sees another person that's just so angry that, and we've seen people that get stuck in these loops that you've maybe been friends with them online for years now, and you see that they're literally still making the exact same argument, they're posting the same memes, they're bitching about the same thing, they're still doing the same fucking thing, they're stuck in this loop. And
to them, they justify, they're like, well, until we have freedom, I'm just going to keep posting and just keep on posting. And they think that that's just all they can do.
Right. Yeah. Or like you see that meme, like, you know, where they're joking about wasting 6 hours shit posting or something. It's like, well, why don't you take that 6 hours and fucking do some deep meditation or like get into yourself or go, you know, actually go out and try to connect and create some project that's really going to fucking help transform the world. Like put that energy into something rather than just trying to bitch about everything.
Right. And another common misunderstanding I want to throw out there too is that people act like, well, it's either two sides of the, you know, it's always in balance. It's the dialectics, always with the dialectics. Mm-hmm. So it's people either saying, you know, you should never be angry. You know, that's bad. It's negative. That's the very new age perspective. And then, like on the other side of the coin is like, well, if you don't get mad, like, how would you do anything? That's also imbalanced because I feel like you can see things that need action without staying angry. Like, you know, I mean, like, look at like sort of the martial artist, the Eastern philosophy, martial arts type of approach to that whole thing is, you know, they don't act out of anger. They're going to defend themselves. They're going to take action. You bet your ass. Like, you know, you'll be on your ass before you even know what happened, but they didn't get angry about it. They own their own emotions. They've mastered themselves, but they also know when to take action.
Hmm. Well, and I think
So,
recognizing and using anger as a drive, because it is a very powerful, it creates a very strong, magical, energetic charge.
right. But it can be
You know, because
very
emotion
small,
is energy in motion. But when
very
we can, yeah, when we can harvest that and then use it, you can be driven and have that righteous anger to drive you as a force. But you don't necessarily have to use that in your delivery of the information.
good point. Very good point.
You know, because if think about it, you know, if you're trying to put people on information and they just see you as this really angry person who's always cussing at everybody or has this negative worldview or just, you know, is shutting off everybody in his life, family and friends. No one wants to be that person. Like, people want to be inspired, because most people don't believe in the state or justify it because they actually want it. It's because they feel lost and they don't see any other options. So becoming the inspiration, developing the real options that they can see that you can give them. They're like, oh, well, what else would we do? You're like, well, we can try this. Let's do this. We have these projects we're working on. You could go to this source.
Right.
Start coming up with real options.
The
And
ones to going first. You know, why not
yeah,
us?
exactly. So, which is, you know, why we are co-creating that, you know, the like, oh, well, what else massive projects we are. Do this. We have these projects we're working on. You could go to this source. Start coming up with real options.
The ones to going first. You know, why not us?
Exactly. I think you got feedback loop on your sound.
Yeah. I'm trying to get out of it. There we go. My bad.
You're good.
I was trying to check the time, see what time we were at, and I like opened up the live video. Anyways,
but yeah, I guess another thing that we could tie in with this unconscious loop here is addiction. I think this is a big one it really applies to. So much addiction comes from unconscious pain and action. And they're doing it to distract themselves, and they end up, you know, cutting themselves off from others and from the guidance of their ancestors and from new potential energy. But then they become identified in that addiction, like, oh, you know, I'm a meth addict, I'm an alcoholic, this is who I am. And even if they, especially if they take it from the perspective of they believe it's just like it's just their genetics, and they're taking the whole victimhood mentality of it, absolutely sets them up for this feedback loop. Like, the victimhood mentality and this feedback loop just go hand in hand.
absolutely.
Because when they start telling themselves that and they're identifying that, they're reinforcing it in their ego, which then goes into the subconscious mind. They take action on it, goes into the unconscious mind, and then the cycle just gets deeper and deeper, and that's how they fall farther and farther into the loop of addiction. And they always say, hey, I want to stop, I want to change, but they can't seem to do it. It's because the unconscious mind, you know, it, like, you know, I was telling you about the other day, it's like a giant, like, you know, 2,000-pound gorilla. You know, I think I used the metaphor of King Kong, you know, and the unconscious mind is like that giant gorilla that's holding us. And whenever it feels attacked, or like, you know, like those planes and everything are coming after it, it tries to, you know, carry you up and, you know, protect you and everything, because that's what it's supposed to do. But it does it without realizing, if it wasn't holding on so tight, it wouldn't be drawing all that fire. It wouldn't be getting all that attention, you know? And I think that's a really good way to look at it, because it's such a strong force. You know, the subconscious and unconscious mind process information so much more information than the conscious mind does. So a lot of our behavior is driven by these.
That's so incredibly profound, man. Because it's such that tricky thing, the dynamic between two different people, especially when they're both in their ego. Their egos are reflecting back to each other like twofold. So I call it triggering triggers, because it's another feedback loop. Because you know, the gorilla perceives the world as hostile, therefore he becomes more enraged and more destructive. But the world is only hostile because he's enraged and destructive. So they're both feeding on each other and just causing more and more chaos. And that's literally what's happening in the world. All this chaos is just like, who started it, like the wars and bombing each other, and religions, and all the left and the right. I mean, it's all just like, well, they did this, so we're doing this, and like, two wrongs making a fucking right. I mean, that's what it all is. And it all comes down to a lack or an ignorance of natural law, cause and effect, and balance. It's all just unconscious behavior and getting polarized into dialectics left and right. I mean, if we could just address those two things, holy shit, would the world be different. Just that. And it all starts here. Principle of mentalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Becoming a conscious of these dynamics. I mean, why do I care so much about power? That question my friend asked me. Look at this place.
Yeah. No. So yeah, let's see. And another big one that we could see this play out in, I think, is in relationships, like romantic relationships.
Absolutely.
This is a big one when people get in toxic relationships, that it's just back and forth, and they break up and they're together, and they break up and they're together, or they yell and they fight and then they're okay, and then and not in like a normal, like a healthy way of we're having a disagreement, but in a toxic way, that it's this cycle that's constantly happening. And a lot of that, it's coming from unconscious projection, and especially in a romantic relationship, when two people come together like that, and especially like when they're like living together, or they're married, like really very serious, they're going to trigger and start reflecting each other's unconscious stuff. Like if looking at it from an astrological perspective, if I want to do like relationship counseling or anything, what I would do is I actually take each person's birth chart, and then you overlay them, and then you look at where their different planets and things sit, because it's energetically, they actually become one being. So like when you hear people say they talk about the relationship, and they're kind of talking about it like its own being, it's kind of because it is its own energetic being, and it's a blend of it's a blend of what they're each bringing to the table. So that's gonna come up, and if they're not aware of their stuff, or they have some those base assumptions and belief systems that are deep down, for a great one would be like all men are just cheaters, or only want sex, or all women are just whores, or you see this where people, they get cheated on a little bit, and then they take that so deeply, and they hold on to it just as like a belief, and then they expect that in every other relationship.
Right. And of course, that way their expectations, or that they've made their mind up that this is just how things are, they're going to keep attracting those type of people, that is reinforcing its confirmation bias and self-fulfilling prophecies. Because then it's like, because that's what the ego all it's always about, is confirming its own bullshit. So it's attracting those negative and other unconscious people, and then the ego says, see, I knew it, like this is just how they all are, and like I'll never find true love, and always the victim.
Yep. And another way this plays out too, I think that is really big, that a lot of people might have experienced or be able to relate to, or have seen in other people's relationships they've observed in their life, is that you'll get people that they're constantly accusing their spouse of cheating, or they're always like trying to go through their phone or their social media, and it's all this projection. Usually the person that's like constantly accusing of that, almost always, is either the one doing it themselves, or they're thinking about doing it, or they just have these unconscious assumptions like, oh, all men are dogs, or all women are whores, or whatever that may be. They have that, and then they start projecting that onto the other person. That becomes reinforced in their belief system. Then it becomes a part of their identity and how they view things. And, and then that cycle just feeds back.
Right. Because because the ego is all about protection, self-preservation. It's this sort of unspoken law that it operates on, of if I don't do it first, they'll do it to me. So think about that for a second. And all these unconscious behaviors that they're projecting and live, being very fear-based about, oh, you're doing this and you're doing that. It's because they don't trust their own selves to not do those things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Tying it back to, both the principle of mentalism and, the principle of correspondence. It's their inner state of mind that they're reflecting out and projecting onto the world, as within, as without. How they're feeling internally. They put, and you see this when people have like a negative worldview and they're like, they really hate themselves or they don't like their life and they're like, oh, the whole world's shitty. Well, that's their projection. Right. They're putting their own stuff that they're not wanting to look at and they're denying within their own self, and then they're projectile vomiting over everything else but them. And that's where that symptom comes in that we talk about, that you see all these behaviors, you'll notice something. They're always the victim. It's always pointing everything outward, never inward.
Right. And once again, that confirmation bias. If you think the world is shit and everyone's just a bunch of stupid sheeple, that's what you're going to get. And you've got those, the lens filter, and that's all you're going to see. You're going to, miracles will be happening right in front of your face and you won't even see them because you're not looking for it. It's just something called the reticular activation system. And it's a brain phenomenon where it's filtering information and it's only looking for what it's looking for. So say like, you're having a conversation with a friend and, a hot woman walks into the room. Suddenly you're not listening to them anymore. And then you want to talk to them. But then a guy with a gun comes in and suddenly nothing else is important as the actual hostile threat in the room. So it's the same type of thing. You're going to focus in and lock in on and only perceive that which is, quote unquote, serving you. But when you're operating from the ego, the only thing that's serving you is keeping that fear alive and confirming all that bullshit and all that victimhood. And, everyone's just out to get you and everything's a conspiracy. I mean, it's all just different forms of the same thing.
Yeah. And let's hit on
the government's evil. It's all just different versions of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And let's hit on, why is it that people like their victimhood mentality? And I think there's a big reason, because it puts the responsibility, the ability to respond outside. Because then they can be like, oh, the government's enslaving me. Oh, my spouse cheated on me. Oh, this drug's too hard to get off of.
Right.
Oh, this depression's too hard to beat. I have PTSD. Whatever the victimhood mentality is, you're rewriting your story when you're like telling that and you're accepting that mindset. And by doing it, you're trying to put the responsibility elsewhere instead of taking it on yourself to address that situation and properly transmute it and learn from it. Because all of these are just challenges. This is all part of the
resistance. It's much easier it's the path of least resistance. It's so much easier to just sit there and blame everyone else instead, because they don't call it shadow play. They call it shadow work. It is work. It's hard and it's painful. It's terrifying, all that stuff. But it's actually the only sane choice. But also to add to what you were saying about why people actually like and revere their victim mentality is because it gives them a sense of self-importance. So the only reason that people operate from a egoic imbalance, so again, to reiterate, we've said this so many times, the ego is not inherently bad. It's that when you're under trauma-based mind control, which basically everybody is under some form of it, trauma-based means you've been under coercion, whether it's from the government, whether it's from your religion, etc. You have trauma that you're operating from and causing your ego to be in a state of imbalance, which either turns outwardly or inwardly. So you're either self-destructive in thinking you don't, deserve love, you're just a failure, all those kind of little lies that we tell ourselves, or you're pointing it outwards and saying, the world is just shit and everyone's just out to get you because that you're operating from your pain, from your unresolved wounding, and then just projecting that onto people. But when you have what your ego actually is your sense of self. So if you're under, if you have unresolved trauma, your sense of self has been damaged. And what that manifests as is, I don't know where I begin and where I end. So you either have no healthy boundaries and you let people run over you, or you're overstepping your own boundaries and trampling on other people's rights. And so that victim mentality gives you a sense of self-importance, because how can name any way you can phrase or describe your victim situation? Try to do that without saying me. You did this to me, like, and by pointing the finger, you're elevating yourself, because that's what the ego wants to do. And when you're in your wounding, you are down, like your sense of worth is downgraded. You're damaged. So you're trying to use any kind of tactic to elevate yourself, even though it's on a false paradigm. So you're saying, like, you did this, you cheated, you ruined our relationship, the government's whatever, just like whatever it is that you're blaming, it's not inherently wrong, but it's addictive to give yourself that sense of self-importance, to just say, like, well, I'm right because you did me wrong, therefore I have the right to be angry and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that I think that's such a really, really great thing to get into there too. And like I said, and as you're saying there, with their ego, and they're searching for that sense of self because it was wounded, and they don't have those boundaries, so they don't know where they stop and they begin. So that's why they're looking for all these things to identify with. So they look for every little label they can, so they can identify with it, and then
they don't know who they really are,
because they're like, oh, this is who I am now.
Right. Your flag, your favorite sports team, just whatever it is, as ridiculous as that seems, it's all coming from, I don't know who I am, so I need to cling to things outside myself and say, oh, that's me, that's who I am. Don't you dare talk shit about the Cowboys. That's personal attack on my, my very being.
No, it's such a great thing to get into. And like you said, the more we've talked about this, the more things we've really seen it like applied to, and the more ways we've kind of seen it play out, both, just thinking about it and talking about, in situations, but also in our personal interactions. Since we kind of came discover this concept, we've been observing how it plays with different sides of where people are. And it doesn't matter of whether they're like swung in a far left imbalance or the pendulum is swung to the far right of an imbalance. Whenever you're so far out of a balance, you'll notice the cycles start to come in, and it's very interesting to see from no matter which side of the way you're looking at it.
Right. Hey man, I got this. I see this comment here from Wolf on.
Cool.
And I think it's a great point he's bringing up that we ought to address. So he says, some people actually are victims though, and don't have the privilege of changing their circumstances, and that is a totally valid point. We're not trying to say that there's no such thing as victims, or it's not okay to be a victim. Like when you're under, let me put it this way: trauma is very real, and it's wounding, it's damaging to the psyche. And when you're in that state, you're not operating from your most authentic self. And that, in no way am I trying to downplay that or say that it's nonsense. We're specifically talking about people, when you look back at the symbol behind his head, we're talking about people who are stuck in that. I've been a victim. Brian's been a victim. We've seen and endured some really horrible things. And you can't rush your healing either. It's okay to be where you are. It's okay to be wounded. It's okay to feel pain and be confused and be unsure, and have a hard time trusting people because it makes sense. Like, you've been hurt. again, I'm not trying to downplay that. I'm sorry if that came off that way, but we're specifically talking about people that become addicted to that sense of self-importance that the victimhood gives them, to where when it's time to move on, they're staying there. Again, I've been a victim. It's a part of the process. You have to be where you are. You have to honor. You can't just flip a switch and be healed. In no way am I trying to say that whatsoever. But it's important to take your power back, because that's what this all comes back to. As long as you stay a victim, you're powerless, and you're continuing to give power to the people that wronged you, that harmed you, if that makes sense. You still with us, Brian? You look frozen there. Brian.
No.
Okay, I hear you. I think it's just really laggy.
Can you see me?
Well, I hear you,
it
but
says I'm on.
Picture's still frozen.
Yeah, I'll just give it a second. It might pop back up here. I think it should be.
I think we're back now. Okay, good.
Okay, cool. So I'd like to address that a little bit.
Sure, man.
So let's understand, taking it back to the trivium process, the principle mentalism, everything starts with a base foundational assumption and belief. So when we can look at this from you could say a shamanic perspective, an animistic perspective, an empowered perspective, and you're looking at it from the sense that this life experience is something that you as an individuation of consciousness chose to come in and experience. Like if you want to look at it like a game, let's use this metaphor because it's very helpful. Just like when you play a video game, you can go in there and you can choose different difficulties. And as a soul, if you choose a more difficult, life experience, that's because you're wanting that challenge, because those challenges, that's what makes the game fun. If you look at the hero's journey or any good story, it's where that hero, where that person is really going through that struggle, that darkness, and they don't know if they're going to make it through. But it's those experiences in our life that give us the most value. So understanding it is possible for other people to wrong you and to wrong to happen to you, but also understanding that you as an individuation of consciousness, as an infinite soul, signed up and chose to have challenging experiences so you could learn and gain insight from those and gain wisdom. I as a child, I experienced, sexual abuse when I was a young kid. I totally get where you're coming from when you're saying some people are victims, but I can also take back my power and come at it from an empowered state of being where I recognize that was a challenge, and that allowed me to understand sides of life and understand mindsets and pain that other people have. And that has led me on my path of being able to help and coach people and work them through this trauma and get them out of this feedback loop that we're talking about.
Right on, man.
So that was just my little, what I'd like to address on that.
That's great. Yeah, because like I was saying, as long as you stay a victim, you're continuing to give power to your abusers. As soon as you stop being a victim and say, yes, that happened to me, but I'm not going to let it rule me anymore, you're taking your power back, and there's nothing they can do to you at that point. They don't hold power over you anymore. And the other thing, there's one more thing I wanted to add too. There's a quote somewhere, and I always forget the exact wording, but to paraphrase, it's that, what has happened to you is not your fault, but healing is still your responsibility. And that really encapsulates what we're getting at here too, is that we're not trying to victim blame at all. We're not trying to justify any wrongdoings. Absolutely. We're trying to create a world where people understand right from wrong and aren't creating victims at all. But at the same time, we're responsible for healing our own traumas, and ultimately, you have to step into your power and become the alchemist and learn to like, you can't change what happened to you, but you can change what you do with that. And the more you've suffered, the more power you have to transmute that into some serious power. I mean, the more, when you really start doing this, you understand the depths of what I'm saying right now. But the darker, it's like that Jung quote, Carl Jung, that talks about like the highest tree, can only stand that tall because its roots go that deep into the dark earth, like as above, so below. That's all about balance. And so the more you suffer, the more light is going to shine through you too, because you have to take that plunge into yourself and come out the other side.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is the hero's journey, and that's the purpose of why we are all here, is to become the hero of our own story and realize that, you are the author, you're the writer, you're the main character of your own story. So belief systems and things that we've been told throughout our lives, being able to recognize when you're accepting a belief system or story, a narrative that you're taking from someone else, and don't accept that. Start realizing that it's not their fucking story to write, it's your story. So step back into your power and create whatever you want with it.
Yes, absolutely. It's your story.
Yeah.
And people can only take it from you if you let them.
Exactly.
Man.
Was there any other comments on there, or I don't have anything pulled up, so if there's anything else we can maybe address? Or
I saw that Wolf had also asked how that relates to the wheel. I'm not sure if he maybe missed the introduction part of the talk, but again, the wheel. Each of the 8 spokes correlates to a different component of human consciousness, and when you get stuck in that feedback loop, you're bypassing the 3, the top, the left, and the north, the west, and the northwest, that deal with your relation to others, your guides, and then your manifested behaviors. Right? Is that the third one?
Potential manifested energy. So things that it's potential energy that's there, but it hasn't come into manifestation. So when you're cutting yourself off from new potential, you get stuck in the same old loop.
Right. And you create the same cycles, the same situations. And because you're not aware of it, you feel helpless and lost, because you're like, why does this keep happening to me? Like, again, with the me.
Right. Right. So yeah. So if Daniel, if you did happen to miss the first little bit, whenever this is done, it'll be up and archived and everything. So please go back and check that beginning part out, where I right at the very beginning, I kind of explained it all and introduced the 9 worlds of Norse mythology and kind of what those all represent on an internal aspect, and how those relate to us on a psychological level.
Yes, brother. Is there any other things you wanted to add in?
Let's see. Let me double check our notes here that we have. I guess another big one that we didn't necessarily hit on that this loop can definitely apply to is religion. Religion's a big one that people can obviously become very dogmatic about it. And a lot of it comes from like their unconscious beliefs that they've accepted and about themselves and about the world. A big one that, as I like to talk about is original sin. And I myself, as like to use the acronym for sin as self-imposed negativity, because that's what it is. It is a belief system. It is a mindset that you accept and impose upon yourself. And when people accept that, that's self-hatred. And it goes right down to the unconscious mind, and boom, does it open up for dogmatic behavior, and hence, 2,000 years of Christianity.
There's no way that you could believe that and not be in victim mentality, because literally the very premise of that is that I was born flawed. I am inherently evil. and broken, and the only thing that can fix me is something that ain't me. That victim mentality in a nutshell. I mean, that's awful.
Yeah. And then they accept what I call, the idea of they need that savior projection. So they start looking for things outside of themselves to save them. The same thing an addict is doing. They're looking for that drug to distract them. In a codependent relationship, they're looking for that person to distract them. It's all distraction from themselves, where they don't want to save themselves. And I did a video on my Mastering Midgard YouTube called Christian Savior Projection, where I talk about this specific thing. But they've accepted this idea of self-loathing and self-hatred. It's went to the unconscious mind, and they've accepted the base assumption that they need a savior. They can't save themselves. And then they project all that crap onto everybody else. And they're like, oh, Jesus, Jesus loves you. You just need to accept the grace of God, but at the same time, by telling you that, they don't realize that they're also telling you that, well, you're sinful, you're flawed. But then they want to be like, but he loves you, and they don't see, it's like, dude, no, that's not, I'm not buying that shit. So you see that projection come out, and it becomes a very dogmatic cycle. And this applies for any religion can be taken to this extreme. Don't think we're only singling out Christianity. That we were both just happened to be raised in Christian homes, and being in the West, it's the dominant religion here. It can equally apply to the other Abrahamic traditions or any belief system that someone becomes very dogmatic about it because they're not dealing with their own inner demons.
Right. Yeah, we're going to call this a night, but thanks for tuning in, and until next time.